Blue is good all along. Everyone's sick of playing Modern Horizons 3 cards, so let's dive right in and get back to the old meta. Hey guys, welcome back to Casting Commons, a show where we talk and discuss all things Pauper. I am your host, Teasdale, and this is my co-host, the Snare Master Sprite himself, Reese.
Hello.
Before we start, please do not forget to hit that like, subscribe, and follow button so you never miss an upload. It also helps the algorithm and gets us great exposure. Another way to support us is by giving us a 5-star rating on Spotify. It really does help us out. Enough chilling out, I guess, eh? So, Paul, anything been going on? Have I missed much?
Not really. You were sort of involved for most of my crack. So, on the Friday this week, our F&M was cancelled. Basically because the room that we hire wasn't available. So I was able to play in the Friday challenge, which made a nice change. Teasdale was also able to play in the Friday challenge, but just decided not to.
Yeah.
So spectated me for like the first 4 rounds or something instead. But yeah, it was fun. It was well, firstly, it was nice to be able to play in a challenge because usually like the times just don't really line up well for us at all. I did okay. Like I was pretty underwhelmed with my result. I think I ended up 21st. But I think the games I lost just sort of felt more unlucky than anything else. Like round 1, I paired into Baco for my first matchup. Obviously, pretty unlucky. But then I was on the draw and mulled to 5, and then he just kept a 7 and like destroyed me instantly. So I was basically a game down already. And then I was playing Mono Blue Terror, for what it's worth. And then there was some like other weird games where I was like, I stabilized the board with a Murmur Mystic. My opponent had a Terror, and I basically needed to find any cantrips to make some blockers. And I think I drew Counterspell, land, Counterspell, like one after the other, as I was getting hit by this Terror and just basically couldn't find a blocker for it. And then the turn that I found the cantrip, they had drawn the one of Artful Dodge that I countered, and then they flashed it back, and then I countered it again, and then they countered my Counterspell and I died. So it more just felt like a weird variance thing, but the challenge in general, like there was so much Terror. I think was my first 4 games were all against Terror of some variety, 3 mono blue and a blue black, like control-y one. And then I played also against Dredge and Affinity. And the Affinity pilot was also Luffy, which I'll also say is unlucky for me.
Very much so.
That was a tough one as well. But yeah, I think I ended up 3-3. If I'd 4-2'd, I think my breakers were good enough that I would have been the 8th slot, but I would have been close with Baco, who I think ended up being the 8th slot. Yeah, but yeah, nice to be able to play in it. Hopefully, I can play in some more. But just the timing's just always dead awkward.
Yeah, they're not like the Friday one's probably the best for us. Like it's not that it's quite late in the afternoon, but it then also ruins your evening. By the time we finish it, it's usually like if you I think you finish probably about 7 o'clock for us, I think. But then if you top 8, then you're also even further into that. So then obviously like for F&Ms and stuff like that's a write off, and then obviously I have little one usually, so it's usually quite it's just time wise that's awkward.
Also with it starting at 2, you either have to like finish work early on a Friday or work from home and be able to like sort of work around the first round. It's the sort of a pretty weird time to start. But then the other ones aren't great either because the Saturday one essentially writes off the full day because it's bang in the middle of the day. And then the Sunday one, it basically either writes off your full Sunday night or goes into your Monday morning, which is not ideal either. But yeah, it's obviously works better for people in other parts of the world as well. So we can't complain too much.
Yeah, they're odd, but I think also I'm sure the Friday challenge used to start earlier as well. I think it used to start like 1. But I don't know if with the time change or something, I don't know how it's worked, but it seems to obviously be on later with the daylight saving times or something. But I'm sure it used to start at 1 for us, and then it used to finish by like 5:30. If you didn't top 8, so like the 6 rounds would finish at like 5:30, 6 o'clock.
Yeah, that would have worked out better because then I could still, if F&M was on, I could still go F&M, I suppose. But yeah, it was decent, nice to play in. I ended up making money on it anyway. I got my entry fee back plus 10 chests or something like that, or 5 chests, I can't remember. Yeah, decent. What about yourself? Apart from not playing in the challenge when you could have.
Yeah, apart from not playing in the challenge when I could have. Yeah, not really a lot apart from trying to brew and edit decks and like the wild ones, like the cat food, the mono black devotion that was live last week. Changing up like petitioner combo stuff like that. Just trying to record and jam as many recordings as possible because I've got 2 weeks worth of recording to do because I'm off next week. I'm away, so it's trying to find that window of making sure I can record as much as possible so I don't miss any content because you don't want to happen what happened last week where I forgot to record. Yeah, but other than that, that's pretty much it. Been following the leagues and the wild decks that have been 5-0, like Floyd's a 5-0 with like a black Tron deck, which was pretty sweet. A lot of like black green fog as well, which is pretty cool to see.
Yeah, the black Tron especially is pretty interesting. I was a big fan of the mono red Tron. And this is obviously just a slightly like a different way to take that Tron package, which we're not really seeing any Tron at the moment. So it's cool to see people still trying to brew with it and get it to do something in the current meta.
Yeah, and I guess that might actually change, I guess, considering obviously if we look at the challenges, there's no sponsor at all almost.
Yeah.
So maybe Return of Tron is needed.
And even the ones you see are the ones without the land disruption in.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Any moving on to some news?
Yeah, go for it.
So again, just reiterating the fact that the Casting Commons Twitter page is obviously retweeting all the spicy brews, the leagues, and also to challenge results, just to try to keep ahead of the curve, to be a hub for any tech, any adaptation for any sort of decks, and also just a great place to obviously check out for competitive Pauper. If you are interested, just give us a little follow. It is always a great way to support us too. Moving on to some tournament news. Come on, Katowice in Poland are hosting a Pauper event and a Pauper's Trio event on the 28th and 29th of September. There will be also on-demand side events, so it's not too bad if you end up scrubbing out. And I've been told it is the best event in Poland, so the cap for the event is 128 places, and the tickets are on sale in the description below. So please, if you are even in that area, I'd get the tickets and go in because it will be a good event. Finally, I guess Nationals update. A bit closer to home. The video for Nationals is now live. We just missed the window, I think, from last week's recording by I actually think like a few hours. But that's now live. It announced that obviously there is a community members sale, so anyone who has a community where they have Pauper in the UK, they'll have a community representative for that, and they'll be able to give you the password to enter and buy your tickets. And they are live now. So if you're obviously a part of the Pauper community and didn't realise that, just speak to your community manager or ask your local game store. I'm sure they'll point you in the right direction, and they'll have the code to buy the tickets. The link to buy the tickets will be in the show notes. And if you are not part of the community, do not worry. There is a general sale on the 2nd of October, I believe it is the start of the general sale. So you don't need a code, and it'll be open to the general public. And the hype for this event is real. I know a lot of people who haven't even bought the tickets yet. And I also know there is also people that have, and there's over a third of the tickets are already being sold just in the community sale. So
that's pretty good.
Pretty good going. So yeah, excited. Not far off. Not far off indeed.
Especially as that's in like a third of the tickets sold in what, 4 days, 3 days? It went live on Friday, right?
Yep. So
Nice.
it's pretty good going. I wasn't far off. I predicted that 40 tickets were going to be sold, and I think I was like 2 off. So, so not bad finger in the air, I guess, but we're doing good. Hopefully this momentum will carry on going because I know a lot of people haven't got round to buying tickets. Obviously people will be in different financial situations or just not got round to it. Yeah, and there'll be a lot of tickets selling. So if you are even considering going, I'd definitely just recommend getting a ticket. And if you are interested, I'll probably try and remember to put the video in the show notes. So you can check that out if you haven't seen it. And it gives all the prize structure and all that sort of stuff, like the player mat art, and all that sort of good stuff. So yeah, I recommend checking it out.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one.
Would you like to move on to the Friday challenge?
Yeah. So Friday, the 6th of September, 56 players. Obviously, this is the one I also played Mono Blue Terror in. First place was Blue Black Terror. Second was a variant of Mono Blue Terror, which I'm assuming we're going to touch on. Third was White Weenie. Fourth was Mono Blue Terror. Fifth was Kuldotha. Sixth was Grixis Affinity. Seventh was also Kuldotha. And eighth was Mono Blue Terror, piloted by Baco. And then the two near misses. Ninth was another Mono Blue Terror. And 10th was Blue Black Fae, the control version. I guess the first comment is there's a lot of Mono Blue Terror.
Lots.
in this challenge especially, there's just like a ridiculous amount of Mono Blue Terror.
To no one's surprise, it was the most played deck.
Yeah. I don't really get why either. Like it just seems like everyone was like, right, I'm gonna play one of these top 5, I'm gonna play this one. And everyone just sort of came to the same conclusion. One thing I did notice, there was like hardly any glee at all. I'm not sure if you've got the percentage there, Teasdale, but I basically didn't see any glee in like the top 25, 26 decks.
So there was 3 Jund Brood Scale, and there was 2 Golgari Brood Scale, and both had a negative win rate.
Yeah.
7 wins, 9 losses for Jund at 43%, and then a 42% for Black Green.
Which sort of translates well to me not seeing any of them in the top 32, because none of them were in the top 32. So yeah, a really good week for Terror, but a really bad week, or bad day for Glee.
Mono Blue Terror was not only the most played deck, taking up 22% of the meta, it also had a 57% win rate as well.
Yeah,
so obviously
it's a big positive win rate as well.
And for reference, Kuldotha was the second most played deck with 11 pilots at 19% of the meta, so just shy of 20% of the meta, 19.6, and that had a negative win rate of just shy of 50% of a 47% win rate. So like, you tend to find like a deck generally, unless it'll peter, even if it's like a most played deck, generally it'll sort of do okayish with like a 50-ish% win rate.
Yeah.
But like a good 57% win rate for Mono Blue Terror is definitely shown here with how many are in the top 8 here, or top 10.
Yeah, I think with that many pilots as well, 57% is really big. Usually if you go up in pilots, your win rate or your win percentage tends to go down, because obviously you've got a mixture of skill of players piloting it, but to maintain that 57% while being the most played deck is really big.
Another deck that sort of fell off as well is like Ponza or the green-red decks. There is literally only 2 of them in the entire of the challenge, and they have a 30% win rate. So definitely seems like the big 5 are definitely, even in certain challenges, like each one changes, but in this particular challenge, 2 out of the 5 have definitely fell off. The other 3 are not only really highly played, but also petering around okay. Like Kuldotha's got like just under a 50% win rate, going 26 and 30, but Grixis Affinity was the next best, most played deck, and had literally 25 wins, 26 losses, so just shy of 50%, which isn't bad with 9, like I said, 16% of the meta, for sure.
Looking, I guess, closer at some of these decks, obviously O'Daniel in first place with Blue Black Terror, the same Blue Black Terror that they've been playing for like 8 months or something now.
Yep.
Yeah,
Nothing's changed.
No, they just seem to be able to rep this deck and do really well with it, which is cool. The second place deck, Carves mono blue splash black Terra, is a bit more interesting. It's essentially the mono blue Terra boomerang list, but has squeezed in 4 sneaky snackers, a single contaminated aquafire, so you have a black source to be able to cast them, and 2 copies of foil, which is something I haven't seen in quite a long time, but seems pretty decent with cards like Sneaky Snacker.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I do like the idea of fourth foil. Obviously, as you say, hasn't been around for, I'd say, probably Turbo Initiative sort of era. And I definitely think with Sneaky Snacker, it actually gets a lot better, especially in this deck where you are basically mono blue. You're running 1 Aquifer and then 4 Lorien Reveals to actually cast them.
Yeah.
Like, these cards are free as anything to discard, so it's all you need is a spare island, which with Lorien Revealed again doesn't seem that bad.
No, although it is only on 16 lands,
Hmm.
because of all the 1-mana cantrips and the Lorien Revealed, you do tend to like get to a point where you've got a land or 2 in hand that you can get rid of. Or you can, if you've only got 2 lands in play, you can still pitch that third and operate on a really low land count.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, an interesting one. Foil, especially at the moment, seems pretty decent. Like, there's a lot of like, your opponent will tap out to play a threat, you'll counter it, you'll try and tap out to play your own threat, or vice versa. And if one of those players also has a foil, that can sort of shift that momentum quite quickly, to be fair.
Yeah, it can definitely break the parity on that sort of thing, and I think that's probably where it would shine, and probably where it's done well for Cavs here. I'm still not sold on the Sneaky Snacker.
No.
Personally, I do think foil obviously makes it that little bit better, but you are only playing 2 foil to 4 snackers. Like, don't get me wrong, if you're naturally just mental noting them, and they probably seem okay. But even then, like, watching you play and also playing Terra myself, you see them. If you mill anything that's not a spell, you generally feel bad, no matter what it is.
Yeah, it's not ideal. Obviously the spell count hasn't been reduced because the Delvers have gone in place for these Sneaky Snackers. He's actually only on 3 Cryptic Serpents as well, so the spell count is actually slightly higher. But yeah, just like, if you end a turn mental note and you're trying to set up 2 terrors or something in hand, and you just mill a couple Sneaky Snackers, it's just like, and you're miles off your terrors, it doesn't feel great. I did play, when Sneaky Snacker first come out, I played a blue-black terror list that was sort of similar to this. It lent a bit more on the black for snuff outs as well. And it felt fine. I just was never impressed with the Sneaky Snacker. Like, you used to always just get it clunked in your hand, and just casting it is so bad.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, it just does feel awkward. Like, but obviously, as you say, foil does mitigate that quite a lot, and foil obviously seems quite good. But it is only a 2 of to your 4 snackers, so I can easily see it being still quite clunked in your hand, but less so. Yeah. But cool list. I do believe it is Adapto's original list. What I've heard on the grapevine, but I haven't actually seen the original list from Adapto. But it is still sweet to see. Maybe it is time for foil. Maybe it's time for foil in other decks. Maybe it's like a way for fams to compete, because that taps out quite a lot. But yeah, it's still sweet to see that people are experimenting and doing well, even if it is just jamming Snacker in a terror list. But yeah, pretty cool. Overall, pretty impressed. I don't know if 3 boomerangs or is going to be too little for removal, and no Sleep of the Dead in the main. But
yeah, it's not a lot. It sort of obviously gets impacted a little by the fact you've got foils, so you have that tapped out counterspell essentially from turn 1. But yeah, it's not a lot of removal, and the no Sleep of the Dead as well. Like, I think it was the card that impressed me most in Mono Blue Terror was the Sleep of the Dead in the main. Like, it just won so many games by itself, to the point where I was discussing with yourself, like, do I just not play Boomerang? Do I just put 4 Sleep the Dead in and have just
Yeah.
1 mana removal instead? It's like that good. So yeah, not having it and then only having 3 Boomerangs is a bit sus, but again, the foil seems to like carry a lot.
Mm. Yeah, I think you might be right. One thing that I have noticed though, especially as we go down the challenges, is that basically tapping creatures is almost as good as removing them nowadays.
Mm.
So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe, especially in this foil list, as you say, like Sleep of the Dead may be the card of choice instead of Boomerang, because worst case scenario, you just pitch a Sleep of the Dead.
Yeah.
It's not a removal spell, you've lost it, you can just keep escaping it, and maybe that is the play. But maybe there is something here that they can look at making a actual foil deck, if that makes sense. Not foils in shiny, but you know what I mean.
I
Interesting.
guess one sort of final thing to touch on in the like terror portion of this discussion is the fact that Boomerang in general is not that great right now. Like as you said, the Ponzer's nowhere to be seen.
Yeah.
Bogles is not really a deck that's played at the moment. Most like there's only really Grixis Affinity that plays tapped lands as well that's seeing much play.
Mm-hmm.
So you lose a lot of the utility to go like turn 1 Delver, turn 2 Boomerang, your Utopia Sprawled land or your Aberelf or whatever to stay ahead. Like you lose a lot of that utility at the moment. So it might be a time that the Deem Inferior package might be more worthwhile.
Mm.
Just because the major upside of Boomerang, obviously, other than it being the instant, is sort of vastly diminished, I guess.
Mm. Yeah, that's fair, and that might be the case. Obviously these lists in general are pretty much separated, right? There's Carves on Boomerang and Baker on Boomerang,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
you've got Yux at on Demaferia in ninth, and then there's another one, right? That's
Yeah, the 4th place list
yeah.
is on Demon Fear as well.
So they are still very much split, and still obviously fighting to understand which one is the best list. But yeah, I do agree with you. Like obviously the Boomerang side of things is definitely getting less relevant with all the tap lands and uh, land auras.
And with Sleep the Dead being so good, like
Mm.
it carries a lot of that weight anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, moving on from the Terror stuff,
Mm-hmm.
one deck that has ended up third here that definitely seems very well placed, or a very wise choice for this Friday in particular is White Weenie.
Mm.
Packing Prismatic Strands and 4th Raven Charms in a meta that's full of terrors seems like a really decent place to be. Especially as it can also just pump out a million blockers and then fly over the top.
I think for me, this deck not all like in this challenge is so well positioned when you think about it. Like you've not only got all the stuff for Terra, you're playing Lunark Veteran plus a bunch of 1/2s for Cold Author, and you play 4 Dust to Dusts in the sideboard for Grixifany. You've literally hit the 3 biggest played decks in the challenge.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it seems like a really solid call. Obviously, it's still got the Glee tools in the sideboard, which might have been utilized, but obviously a lot less than normal. But yeah, in general, it seems like a really good shout for this meta in particular.
yeah, definitely. There doesn't seem anything too like it's not even too out the ordinary. Like it's fairly stock for like Kirby's list, so it is just a solid choice if it can hit the right meta, and this definitely seems
Yeah,
like one of
I
them.
think that the main sort of thing I noticed is there's no journeys at all.
Mm.
None in the side, none in the main. So basically leaning pretty hard on the strength of Raven Charm as removal. But I don't think that's the worst place to be, honestly, at the moment.
No, I don't think at all. Moving down, I guess. Obviously, we've spoke about the other terror lists. All pretty stock. Sleep the Dead's the main contender in the rest of the lists, and as we've already talked about, we think the card's pretty good. Fifth place, we're looking at obviously the Cold Author Red, and this list sort of is gone back to including 2 lackeys. And then it's got 2 Goblin Grenades on 1 Chain Lightning, and then 2 Sealer Fires and a Fire Blast.
Yeah,
I don't know what your
I
thoughts are
think
on these.
Cold Author is still in just a weird place where it's not really found its list.
Yeah.
Like there's still like probably 5 slots that are just contested and mostly different for every list. Obviously, there's some cards being spoiled for Dustmorn, that look potentially interesting, so that might confuse things even more. For Kuldotha. But yeah, it very much feels like it's a bit of a halfway house between playing the Lackey and not playing the Lackey, with still the one-off Chain Lightning and a couple Seal of Fires.
One thing that I do think stands out to me now, looking at both the 5th and the 7th place list, is both are on some number of Goblin Grenades.
Yeah.
And I personally think, looking at this, I would look at moving away from Goblin Grenade now. That sort of, not only blue seems to be back in big numbers with obviously Terror, but we've also got further down, we've got decks that seem to be in high resurgence of, as we've seen in the previous weeks, of Spellstutter Sprite making a resurgence. And I think it's probably, Goblin Grenade's probably had its time in the sun in Kuldotha, and I think it's probably best to move away from it, I think.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's sort of a high risk, high reward card. Obviously, it gives you a lot of reach, but if it does get countered, like especially with something like a Hydroblast or a Spellstutter Sprite, you're just not in a good place.
Yeah.
The 7th place list in particular, like you could easily just cut that and put a Fire Blast in.
Yeah.
It sort of has the same downside with Hydroblast, but like doesn't really get Spellstutter Sprited very often. And being an instant, like you can position it where it's least likely to get countered as well.
Or even just put it into like the only running one Seal of Fire as well, which sort of helps you, as you say, you can sort of squeeze it in there and just leave it there where it's you're not too bothered, and it also does help with you resolving your other 1-drops like your Bushwhackers or whatever against Spellstutter Sprite, potentially. But yeah, pretty interesting that they're obviously still not concise on lists, but again, generally I do think probably moving away from Goblin Grenade is probably, would be my thoughts anyways, moving away from that, especially when I'd expect to see more Spellstutter Sprites. And then finally we've got Moneymaker in 6th with Grixis Affinity. Nothing too out the ordinary. Like, they've got Candy Trails, 2 Candy Trails, 2 Spell Bombs. They're on the full 4 Refurbs, 4 Enforcers. They're on triple Crackland and then double Kenku. And then the removal spell of choice is 4 Galv Blast, 2 Cast Down. And then they're running 10 draw spells, choosing 8 of the Deadly Dispute effects, 4 Disputes, 4 Bargains, and then 2 Thought Casts. And then only 1 Toxin Analysis.
Yeah, I think sort of the main swing really in the Grixis list now is, do you have 3 Toxin Analysis and no Cast Downs, or do you have 1 or 2 Cast Downs and reduced numbers of Toxin Analysis? Other than that, I think they're pretty much solved at the moment.
Yeah, I generally agree. I think if I was to play in a challenge with Grixis Affinity, I'd probably lean towards this list with only 1 Toxin Analysis, especially since though the green-red decks are on a downward trend.
Yeah.
So,
and I guess just Chrysalis in general as well, like with the Jund Glee decks sort of being out of contention, and the Ponza decks just not being a thing. Like, there's a lot less Chrysalis in this challenge.
Yeah. And I think, to be fair, against like something like Jund Glee, something like Cast Down does a good enough job of sort of dealing with a Chrysalis. Obviously, against like Jund Glee, where you know it's probably the only real threat you're bothered about. Obviously, bar the Brood Skill combo, so it's not too much to ask. Where obviously against Ponza, where they're just absolutely splurging a bunch of big bombs like Altar Saws, Boredom Parties, etc. The Toxin Analysis is obviously shining there. But yeah, I think pretty, stock looking list. Obviously, a deck that can obviously have as much and as little counter interaction in the board as well. As here has the 4 red elemental blasts, which is probably necessary moving forward with all the terrors of the world.
Pyroblast needs to return.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it for the top 8, right? Because we've obviously covered it, the list. The 7th place Kuldotha list we've sort of covered. 8th place list we've sort of covered from Baco. Same with the 9th place list from Yux as well with Terra. I mean, sort of just this fair control deck, which again we've covered previously and looks fairly stock, I would say. I think
feel like it's exactly the same as the last one we've seen, or the one that we covered previously. Sorry, last week.
Yeah, I definitely think you're right. And again, the sideboard looks like a mystical teaching sideboard with 4 blue mental blasts and then a bog, just chilling.
Even though there's no mystical teachings.
Yeah, just to clarify, there is no mystical teachings either.
It's
Um,
just the sideboard of 1/0s.
yep.
And 4 blue elemental blasts, because
Mm.
you need those.
Yep. But pretty cool to see. I really do like this blue black sort of control deck with Spellstutter. I like the sort of. It shows how powerful Spellstutter Sprite is on its own. That basically all you've got is 4 snackers to sort of help with it, and it's still good enough. That's all you need.
And no way to reset the spell stutters.
Yeah.
Like, you're not playing ninjas or anything like
Mm.
that to get more value out of them. It's literally just like a one-time cast is good enough. Like, it's strong enough to justify that.
Which is definitely shows its power level of the card right now. Yeah, I'd put Spellstutter Sprite in any deck you possibly can, like your Petitioner Mill deck.
Is that a hint to next week's video?
Maybe.
Moving on.
Yeah. Fine with that.
Yeah. So Saturday the 7th had 49 players. First place, Cycle Storm. Tyrube is back.
Woo!
We always said there would be, and now it's finally come true. Second place is Mono Blue Fair. Third, Kuldotha. Fourth is the Blue Black Fair Control. Fifth is Jund Gardens. Sixth, Mono Blue Terror. Seventh, Grixis Affinity. And eighth, Jund Glee. And then the 2 near misses, 9th place, Corgate. And 10th place, Ponzolus. Yeah, completely different to the Friday.
Just a little bit.
I think obviously the biggest winner for us is the hype of a non-Glee combo deck.
Yes.
In the form of Tyrube's Cycle Storm list coming first. We've sort of said for a while that the way the meta is, it could be set up for something as fast as Cycle Storm to do really well. And especially with Tyrube piloting it sort of makes sense that it's here.
Yeah. I think it's like obviously Cycle Storm. I think he has been in the challenges for the past few weeks, but just obviously not kind of transitioned through. I don't know if that is because of the other mid-rangey piles with, like too much Grixis Affinity playing main deck Spellbomb, or he's running too many gardens with bogs or something like that. Maybe there's something that's obviously, I don't know, maybe too many Duresses or something hitting the right time, whatever it may be. But with the 2 most played decks being Terror and Kuldotha, I imagine that's probably where being able to shine. Obviously, they don't really have that much graveyard hate or any interaction really, bar the odd counterspell here and there, which, if planned for, you can obviously fight through, and Tyrube will obviously masterfully be able to fight through the odd relic and the odd counterspell, and that's probably why it's done so well here, because the man is a master at Cycle Storm.
Actual list-wise, I don't really think too much has changed. There is now Siege Smashes in the sideboard. So there is an answer for Relic that is not Vision Charm.
Yep.
Which I know you'll be pleased to see.
Very.
Otherwise, it just seems like a classic Cycle Storm.
Yeah, I think so. And I guess they've got the one landscape too, which is interesting for me. Yeah. I don't know if that's fairly stock or not now. Who knows with Tyrube or Cycle Storm, but it was thing that we were discussing the landscapes when Modern Horizons 3 was spoiled, that this might be a deck that it could fit into or could not fit into, because it depends on the sideboard, where, as you can see in Tyrube's sideboard, is running a 1/of forest, which obviously then hinders the sort of landscape thing if you're searching for the 3 colours in the main deck, where Ash Barons can obviously just keep getting them all. And it also cycles.
Yeah.
Ash Barons obviously cycles a lot easier than a landscape. I should clarify that, because they both cycle. Should we go the actual spice in second place?
Yeah. I don't know about spice. It's second place is Mono Blue Fair. Just a sort of a long forgotten child that has returned, I guess.
Yes. Very much so.
Although there is 4 Snare Master sprites.
Yes.
Hence the intro, which is something that we hadn't seen really in Mono Blue Fair. It sort of got a little bit of testing when it got released in Eldraine, or Returned Eldraine, or whatever it was. But never really stuck. but this is like whole hog full 4.
Yep.
But alongside the fairy seers as well and the fairy miscreants, so just mono 1-drops.
Yeah, I'm actually trying to figure out. I'm assuming it's a spell, like an instant of some description, like that sort of mutagenic-y slot. I actually don't know what they've cut, right?
Yeah, it is the mutagenic growth slot, right? As far as I'm aware, I haven't looked at Mono Blue Fate in a long time. But none of the creatures have been cut because the Brine Barrows are still there. There's still 4 snaps, 4 counter spells, and 4 of one minds. So yeah, my initial thought would be like a spell pierce or like the 2 or 3 mutagenic growths, maybe.
But as mentioned earlier, to be fair, like obviously Spellstutter Sprite in general is really well positioned in the sense of dealing with Glee. It's good at obviously with all the 1-drops in Terra, in Kuldotha, all that sort of good stuff. But then also we've mentioned that the secret reach on Writhing Chrysalis, which is on a downward trend, but also having Snare Master to sort of deal with that, bounce it back, keep the Writhing Chrysalis or the Inaudible Saws or whatever you've got like flying problems down, tap down, is just as good as a removal spell. At the end of the day, Writhing Chrysalis is just a big guy. It's effectively Pauper Tarmogoyf, but that is all it is. It's just a big vanilla guy almost. And Snare Master Sprite is a good way of dealing with that, and it's a good that obviously the mono blue decks have sort of figured a way out to deal with that, I think.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, to be fair. The Snare Master is the Writhing Chrysalis answer. Obviously, the mutagenic, it just doesn't get through it. And it doesn't really protect anything either nowadays from much. Everything's either bigger or just kills you guys anyway.
Yep.
So yeah, it does make a lot of sense that Snare Master is now like up to the task that we sort of thought it would be when it got previewed.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing that I do, well, first of all, one thing that annoys me is please, banders, sort your basics out. Seriously. I was thinking, why is this 2 different piles of islands, but they're running 7 snow covered and 11 normal? Which actually, to be fair, does actually matter when we get further down and look at Campo's list, just to let you know.
Yeah.
But
I guess for me, sideboard wise, 3 Jace's Phantasm seems amazing at the moment. Seems really good. I'm surprised there's not 4, honestly.
I was just about to say the same thing.
Yeah. And an interesting sort of addition is Weakstone's Subjugation, which is a blue for an enchantment. Enchants an artifact or creature, and when it enters the battlefield, you may pay 3. If you do, you tap that permanent, and it just stops the permanent from untapping. I feel like there was another card that did this, but I can't remember what it was, and I don't know if this is better or worse than that other card.
They all pretty much do the same thing, right? Like there's Winter's Rest from memory, which obviously is snow based, hence the Campo comment for the Sunday. But also, I don't know if the other one, I don't know if it does.
Was it something like big might of monsters or something weird like that?
Bind the monsters.
Bind the monsters.
Which
that's
still,
the one. It pings you, right?
Yeah, it pings you equal to its power. So obviously it was good in the initiative era because it was a good answer for the 1/5 vicious battle rager because you only took 1. But obviously if you're on big threats like Writhing Chrysalis, you can take up to 4, 5.
Yeah.
But also the good thing about Weakstone's Subjugation is that it actually hits artifacts. So you could just bring this in against Affinity and just you play tap land. Okay, it's not untapping. It's almost just as good as Boomerang in that sense, if not better. Well, not better, but it's just as good.
Yeah, it's obviously slightly worse than Boomerang, but only costs 1, and it's just it has a bit more utility, I guess, against the Affinity.
Yep.
Like you can hit quite a few different things. You can hit the creatures, you can hit the lands, as you say. Interesting.
Yeah, obviously doubles up as removal for all those surprise reaches. Like if you need more Altasaur hit or more Writhing Chrysalis hit, like obviously it just helps tap guys down and get through. Which is
I guess in a lot of the time it can just be like Snare Master 5 and 6.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty cool. Pretty cool to see mono blue fair.
I guess moving down, like the next deck I wanted to talk about is the third place deck from Elvis 10.
She's alive.
It's yeah. It's called Dotha, but it's more like a pretty classic take on Kuldotha, with 4 reckless impulses, and then like stacks and stacks of burn with two lava spikes, 4 chain lightnings, and then 4 bolts, 4 galt blasts, and 2 fire blasts as well. So a really burn heavy Kuldotha list. And then the creature package, it's like the really old school creature package, I guess, with 4 Epicures, 3 Bushwhackers, and then just 4 Tomb Raiders as like your Swiss Spear slot. So only 11 guys, which is massively out of the norm from what we have seen from Kuldotha. But yeah, I really like Reckless Impulse at the moment as well. Out of the red decks, it gives you a way to catch up once you've failed to kill them.
Yeah, and I also think though that dealing with the board is a lot more commonplace now. So like say Gardens or the Glee decks or whatever are more likely leaning in on Drowning Sorrow than they are, say, Weather the Storm. So just having a straight up burn package is probably equally as good. I also do like the fact of not really having Flame Breather or that sort of effect, because Snuff Out or Cast Down and stuff like that is quite widely played right now. So I'm all for this list. I think this list knows what it wants, even though it basically looks like Monastery Swiss Spear Mono Red, and they've just changed it to Tomb Raider. Like, I am all for this. This list seems pretty well positioned. Yeah.
Mm.
You want to move down on the 4th place list?
Yeah. If you want to
again, just touching on, it's basically a blue-black fake control deck, but it's running terrors, right, as opposed to like something like
two terrors instead of a Gurmag,
and probably a spell of some description.
Yeah.
Yeah. Other than that, fairly stockish. I don't know if it's running preordains instead of Ponder, for example, but other than that, it looks fairly stock. Still on its pile of Hydroblasts and Blue Metal Blast and a bunch of one-offs in the sideboard. So it's a great, well-positioned deck. It just obviously takes time to win with, and obviously the Terrors seem like an okay addition, I guess. Can probably catch people off guard with the amount of numbers it's running as well.
Yeah, it sort of just feels like these type of decks need a bomb, like alongside the Murmur Mystics and the Thorns that they generally play, like whether that's Terror or Gurmag. It's not a huge difference between them really.
No.
So I can see either being decent. Yeah. Obviously the Gurmag's better against Snuff Outs. The Terror's better to have multiple of.
Yeah, that's fair.
Sort of sticking with the Terror, we've got another Terror in 6th place, obviously mono blue, and yeah, the Demon Fury package this time as well.
Yep.
So still very split on Demon or Boomerang.
Yeah, still running the sleeps, but put both of them in the board as well, which is, whatever the player decides, thinks they'll verse whether sleep will be relevant or not. But yeah, Demon Fury seems like a solid choice, as we've already spoke about. And moving on, the only thing to the 5th place list I want to mention, to be fair, is that it's Jund Gardens first of all, but they've only decided to run 1 Heaped Harvest and then ran 6 like Echo Wellspring effects with 4 Wellsprings, 2 Lembas, which just to note that I do think actually Heaped Harvest is probably really well positioned in these. I wouldn't run any more than 3. 2 to 3 seems right, but 1 seems quite low. I think that it allows them to keep up. But one thing to note that they decide to run 1. I don't know about anything else. The Luffy, I don't know if you want to mention anything. Luffy's looks fairly stock. Chose to run it.
Affinity.
Yeah. Chose to run a Gear Seeker instead of a second Kenku.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it. I guess expecting a lot of terror. I guess Gear Seeker obviously shines there as a 5/6.
I guess the main standout from this affinity list, like the main thing that from any affinity list, is the removal package. Luffy's gone full on 4 cast downs, only 2 Galt Blasts. So very much wanting to kill the big bombs rather than go face or kill the little guys early. The last thing really of this challenge that I want to touch on is the 9th place Twister list, which is Colgate.
Yeah.
Which it's not particularly an interesting Colgate list, but we just don't see Colgate. Like we haven't seen it in quite a while, so to have it there is pretty interesting. Sideboard wise, it's pretty heavy on the red blasts. There's 4 pyros and 2 rebs. As obviously like mono blue terror hit in the majority of situations. Also 2 Thraben Charms and 4 Prismatic Strands in the main. So a deck that seems very much built to hit on terror at the moment.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Also 4 remove so as well. I'm unsure if like the sideboard's very, very much geared to hit for the blue decks. If it needs to, you can obviously go to 4 remove souls if it needs to. No breath weapon or like arms of a dad, just one of fumes in the side to sort of deal with maybe the Fays or the Kuldothas or what have you. But it's good to see Colgate back, especially even though it hasn't changed that much. The deck probably is, or like if everything is Terra, Kuldotha, and Affinity, like that seems like a perfect place for Colgate to even shine. Like there was only on the Saturday, this Twister was the only pilot and managed to come 9th. So I'm assuming just missing out on top 8 for Breakers. But yeah, cool to see. I'm not saying I would like to see Colgate, but I do think it's pretty well positioned. If it's the top 5 has sort of changed it up, and this is sort of, the Kuldotha, the Terrors, and the Affinities where we're looking at.
Yeah, it's a nice bit of variety.
Yeah, for sure.
Moving on to Sunday.
I just want to comment on the difference in the 10th place Ponzulus list.
Yeah, go for it.
They've sort of got like a Nyxborn Hydra sort of list with the Generous Ends and the Oliphant as per usual, but they're running a main board Relic and 0 Umina Taverns as well. So that sort of little flex slots that they've got in the Ponzulus builds, they've definitely utilised this to go on making tramples and also having some sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Some sort of terror hit in the main board with a Relic.
Yeah, it's sort of a flex slot that we've seen before in Ponza, like when Terra, like blue-black Terra in particular, I think was big. They ended up putting like 3 relics usually in the main. So it isn't surprising to see that come back. 1 seems like not many. Especially as there's only an additional 1 in the sideboard, so your like max is 2. But it definitely sort of looks like an angle that could be explored more. To maybe make Ponza a bit more relevant.
Yeah, definitely.
Or Ponzulus a bit more relevant.
They're not as you say, not even any additional terror hit by this 1 extra relic in the sideboard. Like they're not utilising Pyroblasts or more graveyard hit or anything really. It's just the only thing I can see is obviously Nyxborn's not the worst against something like Boomerang, but it also can be squeezed in for 1 mana as just a blocker, which could be a turn that they need or whatever. But other than that, it's Ponzulus with a relic in the main. But yeah, happy to move on to Sunday.
So Sunday the 8th, 68 players. So my old comment, it could have been the 64 challenge. The Sunday always seems to be the one that's much higher than the other 2, so it has that potential.
Yep.
First place, Black Green Glee. Second place, Mono Blue Fair. Third place, Jund Glee. 4th place, Mono Blue Fair. 5th place, Mono Blue Fair. 6th place, Kuldotha. 7th, Blue Red Scred. And 8th place, Kuldotha. And then the 2 near misses, Jungly in 9th and a Blue Black Fair Control in 10th. Yeah, as you say, Spellster Sprite. Seems like a good card.
Yep. Just to make note, the 4th most played deck was Mono Blue Fair with 5. Well, it was tied 4th with 5 pilots, and 3 of them top 8'd.
It seems like a very, very big resurgence for Mono Blue Fair. Basically, going from obviously it was a really big deck probably maybe years ago at this point,
Mm.
like quite a while ago, and to see it make such a resurgence, and sort of when you look at these lists as well, they're all utilizing the Snare Master sprite as the or in the main.
Yep.
So it definitely seems like a reasonable answer to this meta.
Definitely. I guess before we jump into mono blue fit in sort not detail, but I also want to point out Campo's list. Firstly, I want to talk about Tiago for obviously coming first in the black green glee. Obviously, as we talked about for Friday, it sort of disappeared almost. It's got I would say it hasn't got more. The percentage of meta is roughly the same with 5 Jund brood scale and 4 Golgari, and both generally have the same-ish win rate, roughly about 50-ish%. But this list doesn't, like, obviously manage to take the whole thing home, and it doesn't look too out of the ordinary. They've probably just found space for, looking at it, they've found space for 2 more protection spells with the 2 last rights, 2 duress, and then 4 Tamiyo's safekeep. Usually they run 6, either 4 Tamiyo's safekeep and 2 something, either duress or last rights. So they probably cut down on some artifacts, I'd guess, looking at it.
Yeah, the mana base looks quite different as well. I think there's definitely a basic or 2 being cut, but there's a Golgari rock farm in there now.
And 2 bogs.
Yeah, as well as two bogs, 2 gardens, 2 Trio Tails, and 3 twisted landscapes. So it definitely seems a lot more like techie sort of cards, I guess, in that mana base.
Yeah, I wonder how relevant the 2 bogs and rock farm were for like terror and such, and I'm guessing that's the only thing that they're really there for. Pretty much the usual stock 18 lands was all untapped and then had 2 gardens which were added later on, and they're sort of were the only tap lands. But now obviously increasing here a little bit more of the tap mana base, but I imagine it's probably pretty relevant with the bogs and the rock farming and terror. But, it's I sort of think that you either play this black green list is that not the exact list, but this sort of idea is pretty much stock. You're changing maybe 2 to 4 cards and maybe the mana base a little bit. The sideboard seems fairly stock at this point too. Starting with 4 drowns, 4 snuffs, and then 3 weathers is usually the go-to, with the occasional 4 slots being different depending on what you're picking your poison averse. Moving on to the general mono blue. All look, the second place, the Poker's Wizards list looks exactly the same as the Saturday's list, right? With the 3 Jace's Phantasm, the 2 Steel Sabotage, the 2 Weak Stones in the side. I think it looks the same, right? With the same 10 instants and spells.
Yeah, I believe so. Where have we gone? I think most of them are the same. The lower list is slightly different.
Yeah, the Campo 5th place list is more different in the. Oh no, it's different in the main as well. So moving on to the 5th place, because the 4th place list is the same as the 2nd place list. The 5th place list.
Yeah, the 4th place list in particular is exactly the same as the Saturday list, including the 7 snow-covered islands. It's not even the same pilot, but they've chosen to exactly copy and paste it and not change it at all. Which is quite funny. But yeah, generally those 2 lists are the exact same and the same as the Saturday list as well.
That's what was happening with the 2nd place list. That's why it was throwing me off. You see, the Of One Mind was slightly higher because it didn't have to put in 7 snow-covered islands. That's why I was getting confused. But
the Campo 5th place list is slightly different. He's went all in on snow-covered islands, so he's got the full 18 snow-covered islands. Rather than the split. But he's also cut down on the Snare Masters, so there's only 2 Snare Masters in favour of 2 more Spell Pierce. Other than that, the main deck is the exact same. Yeah.
Which makes sense, though, because if we're seeing a downward trend of Ponza and Riven Chrysalis in general, Snare Masters sort of utility sort of dwindles a little bit, and that's probably okay, and it's good to just keep an eye on what you expect, and it shows that obviously just that 1 card or that type of card in certain archetypes can definitely impact your deck choices. Because I imagine the spell piece, if you're expecting a lot of terror, for example, probably shines a little bit. But going on to the 18 snow-covered islands obviously ends up mattering in the sideboard, with the 2 Winter's Rest in the side, which is basically like a weak stone subjugation, but costs 2. And when it enchants a creature, and then when it enters the battlefield, it taps enchanted creature, and then as long as you can control another snow permanent, it doesn't untap. So basically, it'll never untap because you always control snow lands, unless they blow up all your lands, obviously. And that's pretty relevant, obviously, dealing with, as you say, Writhen, Chrysalis, and other players.
Yeah, it's an interesting one that he's ended up cutting the Snare Masters from the main, but like then in the sideboard has the 2 Winter's Rest and 2 Freezing Place. Which Freezing Place is a 2-mana sorcery that taps a creature and opponent controls and puts 3 stun counters on it. So you're removing the tapper from the main, or your reusable tapper from the main, and just then putting more tappers in the sideboard sort of is a bit odd to me.
Yeah, I definitely do agree. Like it is definitely odd to cut them and then add even more. Like obviously they just had the previous list just had the weak stone, right?
The 2 weak stones, yeah.
And I think
so they were on 6, and then this list is also on 6, but doesn't have 4 Snare Masters.
Yeah, I think to me what this looks like, it looks like they were probably trying to find a replacement for weak stone.
Yeah,
and like that's why there's a 2-2 split of Freezing Place and Winter's Rest. But I still personally don't even know which one's better. I'd probably say Winter's Rest, but I don't know. Could be wrong.
Interestingly, no Jace's Phantasms in Campo's sideboard as well, which also seems a bit odd.
Yeah, I definitely not really a fan of that. I think Jace's Phantasms is probably the best it's ever been in Mono Blue Fair. Obviously being able to just be a big flying threat seems really good against Mono Blue.
Yeah.
I do like the interest in they've got like a 5th Brine Barrow Intruder in the sideboard with a Cogwalk Wrestler, which is basic Cogwork. Sorry, what did I say?
Cogwalk.
Oh, Cogwork Wrestler. Then
it's exactly Brine Barrow, but he's also an artifact
and a gnome, not a human.
Well, yeah. I guess the artifact's the main thing that could be a downside. Otherwise, it's the exact same.
Yeah. I guess if you have a Brine Barrow and the Wrestler, you can trigger your other mind. There you go.
Yeah.
Upsides.
True.
Yeah, interesting. I guess that effect's always been quite annoying when it comes to creature combat, but I don't know exactly what that's for.
Yeah, I'm not really sure where you'd want. I guess like stuff like Kuldorfer, you would want more Brine Barrow type creatures. Yeah. But if you're already bringing in 4 Hydroblasts, like, do you then need a one more Brine Barrow as well? I'm not sure. But yeah, it is interesting. Obviously cool to see the Mono Blue Fair list from Saturday basically exactly replicated, and then also see like tweaks on it. It's pretty cool to see in just the span of 2 challenges.
Yeah, definitely. What was the other list I wanted to mention was the blue-red Scred list.
The Carrot Eater 7th list.
Yeah, so the Carrot Eater list is not the normal Spock list that we sort of see. It's sort of like old school-esque. Like it's got the augurs in, which makes sort of sense with Kuldorfer making a resurgence, all the other big stuff sort of on the downward trend. There's no energy package. We're on 4 Screds, 3 Lightning Bolts, and 2 Breath Weapons with 1 Beholder Multiverse, which is sort of like pretty old schoolish, sort of, I'd say pre-Lorien revealed sort of playability. And then it's got a random Relic of Progenitus in the main.
Interesting to put Relic in your Terror deck.
Yes.
But I guess this deck isn't really trying to turbo the Terrors out, so you have that opportunity to pop it and not really be too bothered yourself. But I guess there's not really a good enough replacement. Like Tormod's Crypt just doesn't really do anything for you. I'm not even sure what else you could play sort of around that, but feels more like a necessary evil than something it actually wants to play.
Yeah, I can get behind that. But it's it's good that it's obviously like a different sort of take on it. We're not playing the Crimson Fleet Commodore.
Mm.
They usually run like a split of Azure Fleet and Crimson Fleet, and this is
Yeah,
just
yeah.
straight up going for the two of Azure Fleet, which I don't I don't hate. I'm indifferent on the opinion, to be fair, but I guess Crimson Fleet was pretty good at being able to trade with Terrors and Cryptic Serpents, where this is obviously a lot better at taking back the Monarch, I guess.
Mm.
But yeah, pretty interesting list. Interesting to go back, and it seems a very running theme for this challenge. We've had the red deck that's sort of a old school deck,
Yeah.
made a resurgence, sort of like the blue red Scred making a comeback, going old, like bring back older versions, and then obviously the mono blue fair, which is a blast from the past for sure.
Anything else you want to mention in the Sunday challenge?
No, I don't think so. They all look fairly stocked that we've already covered previously, I think.
Sweet. I'm happy to move on then if you are.
Yeah, just shout out obviously to all the grinders that I think we've shouted out. You know, the Campos, the Tiegos, and all that sort of stuff. Is as we've been going along, shout out to them, obviously making it interesting. But shout out to, I don't even know who the pilot was who brought back Mono Blue Fair on the Saturday.
I did know until you asked.
The Bandos.
That's the one.
Yeah, shout out for obviously the resurgence of Mono Blue Fair, but please sort out your basics. And then finally, shout out to Kirblinxy for obviously the data really help us sort of gauge what the meta game's like, the win percentages are like, and what's doing well and all that sort of good stuff in the challenges. Really does help us. Yeah, and I guess shout out obviously Dan for making the Nationals ticket live sale and stuff. You know, always
Yeah.
nice to see.
And definitely if you are in like one of the pauper communities or the groups running leagues, ask whoever runs the league or even message Dan about the pre-sale code and get your tickets bought because it'll be sick.
For sure. Do you want to move on to hot takes for last week?
Yes, my first one was a swing and a miss with a Bogles return to the top tens. There was no Bogles. Bogles seems really bad right now.
Yep.
So I can't imagine that'll be happening anytime soon.
My swing and a miss this week was Pestilence will make top 16 next week. That did not happen. There was one Pestilence in all three challenges, and that was Kirblinxy in 32nd place on the Saturday with cat food. Swing and a miss.
My second one was that there'll be more control sort of cropping up in the meta as it sort of stabilizes, I guess. Which is an interesting one because there's a lot more counter spells, but I don't know if it's control. Like there's a lot of obviously we're seeing a lot of mono blue fair doing really well, which I'm not sure is a control deck, but has control and elements. There's also a lot of the blue black fair control deck, or just like the blue black control deck cropping up now compared to where we used to be. So I don't think we're quite there, but there's sort of the foundations of a control resurgence coming.
Yeah, I'd say like obviously blues obviously massively made a comeback. Obviously with blue terror, blue fear, and the blue black fear control. But it's definitely apart from the blue black fear, it definitely took the tempo-y aggro stance with obviously the spell stutter sprites and the big bombs and stuff. So yeah, it's definitely on. It's on there. It's on the way through for sure. I think now that we're getting this sort of blue spell stutter sprite resurgence, it's generally a control thing or follow. But just not we're again ahead of the game. My last one is that elves will top 8 next week, and that was another swing and a miss. So bad week for Teasdale's hot takes. I think I'd probably agree with Bogles that I think it's probably in a pretty bad place now.
Elves is sort of an interesting one because like the general elf piles seem like not feasible at the moment, but there's a lot of interesting elf lists running like Avenging Hunters and Nick Spawn Hydras that have been cropping up and doing quite well in leagues. so I don't think it's out of the question for one of those type to return. But I think the old style like 10 draw spells, elves decks are sort of a bit by the wayside at the moment.
But I also do think elves is probably worse than it was last week with the resurgence of, not only because of the resurgence of Spellstutter Sprite, but also because the hate for Spellstutter Sprite that's gonna follow. There's just gonna be more suffocating fumes or more breath weapons knocking around to sort of hate that a bit.
Sort of yes, sort of no. Like I get that next week the hate might sort of impact it, but in general, I think elves wants to play against like especially mono blue fair. Like you just really want to play against it with elves because you just smash it.
Yeah, for sure.
So, but yeah, I think as we'll get onto, I guess in the hot takes for next week, the hate that will come for mono blue fair will also make it a hard time for elves.
Yep. Move on to hot takes for next week.
Yeah, my first one is that Pyroblast will return. It seems very needed at the moment. Sort of tying into your hate comment there. There's a lot of blue. There's a lot of potential for Pyroblast to be hitting basically everything from both Mono Blue Fair and Mono Blue Terror. But I guess it's more just like hate in general for those decks will return. We're already seeing relics coming into the main decks for some decks. I imagine like Kuldotha, the return of like Lava Dart and End the Festivities is not out of the question to the main.
Yeah.
But yeah, some sort of red hate piece returning.
I can definitely see that. Mine is that Dredges to return next week, i.e. top 10 one of the challenges. Bar the actual random relics here and there, which is strange because the decks that are maining them aren't running lots in the sideboard.
Yeah.
I can think Dredge is probably okay at the moment. I don't see why it's not. It can definitely do well against the 3 decks or the 4 decks that are now in the top 5, like the Fays, the Kuldothas, and the Terrors of the World. So I could definitely see
I think it could be quite an interesting one against Fae now because, like a Fae of old, you could just like play a play a Stinkweed Imp. If they counter it, you're happy. If they don't counter it, you lock the board down. But now they've got Snare Masters. Like you casting the Stinkweed Imp doesn't become as backbreaking for them because they can just like tap it and keep smacking you in the face.
Yeah.
But obviously stuff like Not of the Bone just gives you like a million years against Fae. So it'd be interesting to see how that shakes out actually.
And I also think that if you do get that time, like you mentioned with Not of the Bone, like generally Fae operates on this tight window of permission and interaction that if you can have that to like say even being able to double Dread Return or whatever, like that's usually enough.
Definitely.
Yeah. So yeah, be interesting to see if it does make a return next week.
And my last one for next week is that there might be a new deck in the top 5 or top 6. Ponza definitely feels like it's fallen by the wayside. And if this Fae spike continues, I could definitely see something like Mono Blue Fae like getting to the top sort of echelons of the Pauper meta game at the moment.
Yeah, going from 0 to 100 in one weekend is definitely a good sign for it for sure. My next one is that I think it's not only is it time to return to Stock Gardens, but I also think Stock Gardens could potentially do well next week if someone does actually play it. I think the time for Writhing Chrysalis in Gardens is probably over. I think people are very much prepared for it, and a deck like Gardens and Jungly, where it's just a dude, it's just basically a Pauper Tarmogoyf, as I keep referring it to, is pretty much like you don't need that anymore, or you don't want that. People are prepared for that. So Stock Gardens is back. Calling it. Yeah, that's it. That's my hot takes to whiff again next week.
Well, we've got we can't do much worse than we did last week, so.
Yeah, true enough. We're not always prophets. Clearly, prophets are always wrong. Even though I said we're never wrong. We're just ahead of the curve. Boggles will return. Pestilence will return. We'll get Control-y and Elves will top 8 some point in the next few weeks. Don't worry. We're always right. Anything else?
No, that's it from me.
Thank you all for listening. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please do not forget to share it with your friends, family, local pauper community, and even your tattoo artist. Very relevant. And do not forget to give us a 5-star rating on Spotify. It really does help us. And that is all from us at Cast and Commons. Until next time, and don't forget to stay hydrated. Peace.
Bye.